All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our 30-minute webinar. If you follow us on social media and or receive our newsletters, you've probably noticed that this month's topic is on well-being. And along those lines, in this webinar, we'll talk about burnout blockers. We'll talk about strategies to help you deal with those things that might question your well-being and focus on self-care techniques. My name is Evelyn Gonzalez, and we also have Heather MacArthur.
Hello. Thanks for joining, everybody. Just as a little bit of a background, Evelyn and I decided to do this webinar. One, I am bad at this, and so I'm trying to get better at it. And I feel like Evelyn is a good role model around this. Not that she does it perfectly, but I feel like she's a good role model for it. So you're going to get both sides of the fence on this.
Yes. Now, I think we can all agree that well-being, it's an important topic, but unfortunately, it's not talked about enough, especially in the workplace. A recent survey shows that 44% of employees in 2024 felt burnout. And I actually wouldn't be surprised if it's more. Would you agree, Heather?
Yeah, no, I've got a feeling people were too busy to even fill out that survey.
I
So
agree. Definitely agree.
Um, yeah, a big thing for me as I started looking at this is I think if someone sent me a survey and said, "Are you burned out?" Part of the problem is I don't like to admit that like
Yeah,
I'm not burned out.
that's right.
I'm working hard. So I think I had read an article that talked about the signs of burnout, and a couple of these, there's a lot out there, but a couple of these really hit home for me is this idea of being exhausted even when you sleep well. I remember going to a nutritionist a while ago and I was like, well, yeah, everyone's tired when they wake up. And he was like, no, you're actually supposed to wake up rested. And I was like, well, that's a novel concept. I didn't know that. um, the persistent pessimism, where you were once optimistic. And I've noticed this a few times in my job where I normally kind of like, even if there's a challenge, I'm ready to charge at it, but now I'm actually irritated by the smallest things
Mhm.
around it. Um, Changes in your appetite or sleep patterns. I'm always hungry, so I don't know if I've ever noticed. I don't know if
Yeah,
I've ever had a change in my. I would probably appreciate it. I would probably be burned out more often if I could change my appetite.
right.
And then a lack of motivation in the things that used to be enjoyable. I think a lot of times I just assign that as exhaustion, and I don't realize like, yeah, but they're not exciting to me either. And then emotional numbness, the lacking the highs or the lows. So you're not super excited about anything, but you're actually not really sad about anything either. I don't know. As I said, I know you're human, Evelyn, but which one of these do you think kind of show up for you that tell you that you're starting to get burned out?
Actually, one that's not listed on here that I'd add to this list is feeling anxious.
Uh,
Feeling anxious, but not knowing what's going on and having to kind of look within, like what's bothering me. I think that's a sign for me is feeling like I don't know what's going on, but I have to dig deep. And that's one of the things we'll talk about is self-talk.
yeah, I love that you just said that because I was like, oh, so this I'm flashing to like when my nutritionist said you should get a good night's sleep and when you wake up you're rested and I was like, oh, and when you said feeling anxious, I was like, oh, that's not that's not the normal everyday.
Right.
I'm like, I don't know when I don't feel anxious. And I would say probably since COVID, I feel like people have, I think that's the danger of this burnout piece is since COVID, there's, especially with people that I talk to and coach with, it's almost like we're starting to adapt to always feeling anxious and
Mhm.
not knowing what to expect and all the uncertainty and everything, which is a recipe for burnout. Well, and that's why today we're going to talk about how do you prevent burnout? So, making sure that you don't get there in the first place, especially with all the craziness going on, and then recognizing we gave you some symptoms, but we're going to go into a little bit more. And then, of course, if you realize, no, I'm in full-blown burnout, how do you repair? So, throw it over to you, Evelyn, since I think you're a lot more disciplined about these things than I am when
Oh,
it comes.
thank you. You give me way too much credit, but I will love to talk about trying to prevent, right? It comes down to trying to prevent. And one of the key things is doing self-talk. For me personally, is trying to avoid putting it out there that I'm stressed,
Mm.
right? And looking within and saying, okay, I'm feeling some type of way. What is it? Is it I feel like I have too much going on, too much is on my plate? How do I address that? Also, self care. I think we underestimate the importance of self care. You mentioned something earlier. You said that sometimes you don't want to admit, right? You don't want to admit when it's we're talking about the survey. No, I'm not stressed. I'm not going to say I'm burnt out. I don't want to admit it. And with self-care, I feel like it's something that perhaps we are taking care of others, right? Or other responsibilities versus ourselves. And it's important to prioritize, whether it's the smallest thing of whatever, for everybody, it's going to be different. Self care is going to look differently for every individual. For somebody, it may be taking some time to read a book. For another one, it's activity. And then boundaries. Setting boundaries is very important, right? Sometimes we want to do too much. And if we can't do it all, it's questioning, perhaps we're questioning our own work ethic. Can I do it all? Right? But it's okay to set boundaries. You know what? My priority is, let's say after work, I want to focus on my family, but I have things to do at work. I'm going to set boundaries. I won't be checking email after 7 o'clock because I want to focus on my family,
Mm.
right? And again, the boundaries are going to look differently for everyone.
Well, I love because we were chatting about this as we were setting up for the webinar, and there's a reason why I wanted you to talk about this is you touched on it lightly, but I want to go back to it around self-talk. I was asking you, oh, what do you say to yourself when you're stressed? And you said, I don't like to label it as stressed. And so you touched on it lightly, but if you could explain like, what do you do instead? Because I'll go like, oh, I'm stressed out. What do I want to do about it? And so it blew my mind when you said like, oh, I don't even label it as stress because I don't even want to acknowledge that or let myself go down that path. So tell me, like, what do
I
you think that?
Thank you. Good question. I feel like stress is often overused. And for me personally, it might not work for everyone. I feel like I think about bigger situations or more stressful situations that other people around me have. And I think, okay, I have no idea what it is to be stressed. Now, do I feel some type of way? Do I feel a little anxious? Do I feel overwhelmed? Then I start looking within self-awareness, which we'll talk about shortly. What what is going on? What is bothering me? Do I have too much on my plate? Am I having a difficult time prioritizing things?
Mm,
Right? It takes a lot for me to say that I'm stressed because I'm more focused on thinking about what is it that's going on and how can I fix it versus I'm just stressed and putting it out there into the universe.
mhm.
That's the feeling that I have, if
Yeah,
that
I
makes sense.
honestly I thought it's an interesting thing because on one hand I'm like, no, I want to acknowledge when I'm stressed, I'm stressed. But when you said that, don't tell me my feelings. But when you said that, I just thought, oh, that's interesting because I also would imagine when it comes to the prevention thing, that if you're going like, oh, I'm starting to feel uncomfortable, I'm starting to not feel so great about things, that you tune in sooner versus if I'm saying like, oh, I'm stressed. By the time I'm saying that, I'm at a breaking point. Like I'm already at a point where honestly, when I say I'm stressed, it's like, oh, I'm ready to stab some people. Not literally, I wouldn't do it. Um, but I could tell like I'm already at that place where I call it I'm not fit for human consumption. And and so you're already kind of far along the way. So from a prevention standpoint, I just thought that was a really interesting thing is that you're pausing and checking in the minute you start to notice like, oh, I'm not feeling comfortable and not accepting, this is my issue, not accepting that discomfort is the norm. Like I just accept that discomfort and anxiety are kind of, oh, that there's always some low grade version of that, and that's just life. Versus like, no, actually, you can actually be calm, cool, and collected and enjoy your life. And when it starts to get uncomfortable, to tune into what's happening there. I'm going to throw it to you again because you mentioned boundaries. I don't mean to jump over self-care because I think it's important, but when you talked about boundaries, you were talking about like, oh, you know, when you answer your emails at a certain time, do you, because this is what I struggle with, and I feel like a lot of people do. When other people are, you know, how do you handle navigating those boundaries without, well, I won't even put a caveat on it. How do you handle navigating those boundaries? Like, how do you set them so that other people respect them?
I think it's important to communicate it, right? So let's say going back to the example of emails, right? I think we're also used to constantly checking our email, especially for work outside of our normal hours. And I think if we communicate that to our team, or perhaps when there's an expectation, right, maybe from others, is to say, yeah, I'm setting some boundaries. I want to focus on my self-care. I want to focus on my well-being. And I've noticed that when I'm trying to do too much, it's affecting me.
Mm.
So this is what I'm doing to prevent me getting to that point where I feel burnt out. And I think it's important to communicate that and have those conversations, because going back to self-care, it's not something that we talk about very much, especially in the workplace, maybe in our personal life, but even in our personal life, right? It carries over into our work environment, where our well-being is questioned, and we're trying to figure out what is it that is bothering me, what is it that's affecting my well-being.
Well, and I think you hit on an important point. Is one, do you even know what those boundaries are? And this kind of goes with the self-talk. Like, do you know what you need? You know, I think that's sometimes the tougher challenge is have I even paused long enough? And it goes back to the I'm worth taking care of. And I say this as like me going on this journey too of what do I actually need? So I can jump to because I can say there's probably some people on the call is like, well, that's nice, Evelyn. I don't think my managers or my team members would even they might laugh at me if I say
Right.
well-being or they're like, what are you talking about? Go do your job. Um, One, sure, maybe that's the case, and I've definitely worked in environments like that. But first, regardless of the environment, do you even take it seriously? And do you think that it's worth it? And then secondly, that's a good check in your environment. And if those of you who are on are people managers, how often do you advertise, like asking them, hey, how's your well-being? What boundaries are you challenged with to set you up for success? Using that language because you're inviting them and letting them know that there's some permission for it. Now that doesn't mean like, oh, I get to perform horribly, but I'm like, I'm not answering email. Well, a big thing that I always say to really set good boundaries, you've also got to be somebody who delivers. So you can't go like, I'm just going to hide behind boundaries and
Absolutely.
I don't do windows, that type of thing. Um, but I know I'll throw out there for those that might be working in environments that are not supportive or you don't feel like they'd be responsive. Check yourself with that. Or is there any evidence to that? But sometimes the reality is that you may not have people who are supportive of that. Is that you get clear. And what you just said about emails, I'm very big on every Friday that I book out at least 2 to 3 weeks out in advance and I book out time for me to get the work done that I need to do. And I manage my calendar, but I put it, if my calendar is visible, I put the name of the project that I'm working on. Like it's legit stuff. It's not put as like optional, or I forgot the word for it that's in the calendar, but that it shows up with the dashed lines like this is tentative. Tentative is what it is in Outlook. No, it's a meeting. It's a meeting to get work done. I deliver and I deliver fast, but part of that's because I'm out in front of my calendar and I'm creating time for me to do things. A lot of people are just they let the meetings come in and the sandbox gets full if you don't have any stuff in there.
And you actually touched on something that's very important as well, because one can have your own boundaries, but I believe it's important to have these conversations. So for everyone who's listening in, right, if you're in an environment that doesn't really talk about well-being, this is a conversation to have, whether it's with HR, it's or with your supervisor, is how do we bring this up in our work environment to address well-being, and or checking in with your own team, right? Leading by example of talking about people's well-being. How do they cope with their own well-being? And how can we have these conversations so that it is something that's important?
Yeah, and I think you're right in terms of having the dialogue. Someone just threw in a question there. Is it fair to say that this could be different depending on the generation we're talking about? I don't think well-being is, but I think the comfort levels, the experiences with can be
Mhm.
generational. Just because, look, even psychology itself was something relatively new, and then we had the whole like self-help generation that kind of came up through the 80s and 90s, and not that I was there for it. But but it is, each culture is a little bit different. I feel like it's a topic, to be honest, I'd love to say it's just because everyone's become so, self-aware and caring about each other. But the data now shows how it's impacting turnover, engagement, performance levels. So it's actually a smart business strategy. It's not just be a good person out there, be a good manager. It's the amount of medical cost. And so I think even the medical field is grappling with, and I know, Evelyn and I talk about this a lot, is just this idea of, addressing well-being, not just, prescribing medication. And by no means am I a doctor, and I'm not getting into the medical side of it, but I was watching an interview, and someone was sharing, yeah, we are never even told that we can, as doctors, and I'm not saying this in every hospital, but it's common that we even talk about nutrition or rest or those types of things. And I think since COVID, it's almost like, how could we not be talking about people's well-being after everything that we went through and everything that companies asked for their employees to do during that time in terms of
Yeah.
working from home and bringing the whole person to the job and navigating that. So anyways, I feel like if you're a leader of, you've got people reporting to you, you absolutely have to make this part of the discussion if you're in HR, but as an individual, that you at least do you have the language for yourself, even if you're not talking to somebody about it? I think you should be, but do you even take the time to think about it for yourself? I know I wasn't.
Absolutely.
Someone shared every generation has their own trauma or experiences that impact what it looks like to be okay. Ah, it's such a good way to phrase that. We're all coming in. Yeah, I always hear like, well, this generation had this trauma and this. And I was like, why are we having the contest of who's got the most trauma in the schoolyard? Um, I think that's absolutely fair. Every generation has got a unique set of standards. And there's always some level of uncertainty. But I think what's important is to address then what's currently happening right now. Like, what is the workplace currently navigating right now, and being in tune with that, regardless of what generation we're coming from. And, technology and all those things and the healthcare system and all those types of things, those are impacting the way that we're showing up. Um, okay, well, let's go from prevention to recognize, which I think we've dovetailed over here quite a bit.
Mhm.
Evelyn's talked a lot about self-awareness and that idea of, what are you feeling? Tuning into what that feeling is. I'm very big on, and this is probably the thing that's helped me pull out of burnout as well as recognize when I'm not where I want to be, when I say I'm not fit for human consumption, is being clear around what it is that I want. And when I'm talking to people about their careers, a lot of times they come in and it's like, well, I'm not getting promoted. And I'll ask them, well, what is it that you want to do? "Oh, I don't know. I want to get promoted." Okay, but what is it that you actually want to be doing? And I think it's the same thing as, do you have clarity of purpose? And it's really easy to get burned out when you don't, because what you're doing may not be returning energy back to you. And so I don't ever look at it as like, well, gosh, I worked 10 hours yesterday. That sounds like a lot, but really you lived through those 10 hours. Did you do something in 10 hours that was rewarding to you? Or did you do something in 10 hours that you resent having to do? If you resented it, I guarantee if you resented doing it for an hour, it could have led to burnout. It's less about the amount of time. We got 24 hours in a day. It's more about the return on investment. And that's where I talk about work-life alignment. And I got a little model for that. But I want to throw that to you before I jump into the model. When it comes to for you, and I'm putting you on the spot, Evelyn, because we didn't hash through this beforehand. We chatted about it a little bit. What would you say? Like, look, this is my true north. This is the compass point that I kind of check if I'm
Mhm.
spending the right amount of time on things. What is it that you focus on for your life to kind of gauge that?
I think family, family is a huge priority for me. And also being able to feel as though I have an alignment with my own career, with my family, and then self-care. Self-care is huge. When I start feeling anxious, whether it's what I'm juggling within work or with my family, realizing what is it that makes me feel good. Again, for everybody's going to be different, their self-care, and it's for me it's activity, it's
Yeah.
working out, being self-aware of what is it that's bothering me. And I wanted to mention this sooner. It's one of the big things that I think we all utilize, right, is social media. And social media can be very helpful for a number of things, right? When we use social media, and how does it make you feel? How much time you're spending into it. I could go in there, it can be something for work that I go in there to check out, and I get sucked in for an hour. And in that hour afterwards, it makes me feel horrible because I think I just wasted an hour of my time. Okay, now I have to recognize that didn't make me feel good, right? So then I set those boundaries to that. It didn't make me feel good. I didn't feel productive. I felt like I wasted time. I need to set that boundary, right? But having that self awareness, and I'm just using social media as an example because there are many things around us that we have to be aware that affects us, right?
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think it's funny because as you're saying, social media, my big thing is what am I clicking on so that the algorithm is teaching it to send me happy things versus
Right.
things that I get like furious about, and it's kind of, rage porn basically. Um, but I will say, like, I do silly memes. I send them to my boyfriend, and then once a week, because we're busy, once a week, we sit down, and it ends up taking us like an hour, but we're cuddled up and we're going through all these goofy things that we sent each other, ridiculous things. Um, but it's turned out to be like kind of we look forward to it every week. So to your point, are you aware of how it's affecting you, and are you being intentional about it? I'm
Mm-hmm.
into this pyramid thing as we're kind of getting through here. Just to give you all a model, I wanted to make sure that we were able to provide you with something tactical to look at. But it's work-life alignment. It's called the pyramid of purpose. I do this a lot with people that we're career coaching with, but I think it starts off with what's your purpose in life? And then there's three layers of bricks. And if you think about a pyramid, the bricks are always the same shape and size. The top is the only thing that's unique. So the bricks are interchangeable. And the bricks are the things that I call tangible. So Evelyn called out family. Well, taking care of her family, only she's going to know if she's doing that to the level that she really, really wants to. It's a little bit intangible because her kids and her husband could be going, you're an amazing mom, an amazing wife, amazing, daughter, sister, all those things. And she can go, yeah, but I'm not showing up the way that I want to. So we're the only gauge on whether or not we're reaching that. The bricks, you mentioned it probably without even realizing it, Evelyn. You said, yeah, and then checking to see how work aligns with that. Like work is a brick, money is a brick, self-care routines are a brick. Friends are a brick. All those, anything that's tangible, they're bricks that help build it. The level that says direct bricks, those are the bricks that are directly impacting your experience of that pop. So if you say family, then probably taking your daughter to school and her soccer practices, those are bricks that are going to directly impact your feeling of what it's like to be part of the family. The work brick may provide you the living and the scheduling and the flexibility to be able to do those things. So that would be building bricks. It helps do some of those direct bricks. The energy and stability bricks down here, we tend to take less risks with. Those are the things that keep a foundation, keep us kind of where we go to recharge. So you mentioned physical fitness, where we go to recharge. So your physical fitness is probably on the bottom. what's interesting about that, and if anybody who knows Evelyn, physical fitness is a priority in her life. So this isn't about, one's important, one's not. It's how do they fit and support one another. The bottom one, we're going to take less gambling with. There's probably going to be more routine around it. The top one, we're probably taking more risks with and trying things and going into uncertain areas. So I'm going to give a couple of examples. This one's mine. Mine is help others be who they're meant to be. Now, I do that through work. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a life coach. So I do that through work. Money is the next one. The more money I make, the more people I can help that can't afford that kind of coaching. Travel, education, and health give me the capabilities to do that on a bigger level. So the more I travel, the more global workplaces I get exposed to. Education. And I've got to be in shape because I'm not 20 anymore. So I've got to be able to do these things. Family and friends are at the bottom for me. Doesn't mean that they don't matter. It's that to me, they are my foundation. My family and friends half the time don't even know what I do for a living. Like, I don't know. She does something. Yay, come to the barbecue. Like that's how we spend our time together. Um, this is another example. This person wanted to see the world. For them, travel and friends are at the top. That's what directly impacts it. Work and money in the middle, family and health at the bottom. And then be a good parent, which goes along a little bit with what Evelyn said. Families there, work and money next, travel, education, fitness at the bottom. What's important to understand is it's not where you put the work brick that matters. It's does it align with what you're trying to do? And these bricks can move around in your lifetime. I know someone that I work closely with, and her kids grew up and went off to college, and family was always her thing. She was able to move family down to the middle brick, and work came up. And she's like, well, I'm still being a good parent by role modeling how I'm leading my career. And so, but the bricks are moving around. Our purpose tends to stay the same. Doesn't mean it can't change, but that's a little bit of that compass that we can check into is how is this helping me do this purpose that I have in this life? And so instead of doing this work-life balance thing that people push, I feel like that's a recipe for burnout, trying to balance the time. Instead, does it align with your purpose? So we want to wrap up because one of the other sides of this is this ability to repair. Because if you've gone down you didn't prevent it, you didn't recognize it in time, and you've hit this level of like, whoa, I'm really in a bad spot. The biggest thing is start to pause immediately and make time for yourself, making sure that you give yourself permission to rest, as Evelyn said earlier, whatever that might be, reading a book, taking a nap, not feeling guilty about taking that nap, and asking for help. Evelyn, which one's hardest for you?
I think asking for help, and I would say that that goes for most people.
Yeah.
I think our clients who we talk to, I think that part is, I think for all of us, we want to do it all, and having to delegate or ask for help, it's difficult,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes we question our own ability to do things, but it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing. People around us, they want to help.
Yeah.
And when we reciprocate, offer our help as well, right? It's an exchange. So I
Yeah.
think that one, it's difficult, but it's doable, right? It's a good practice to have.
Yeah, I will say that asking for help is mine because I real shortly I was in therapy session a couple of years ago, and he leaned in, and I was talking about all these things or whatever, and he says, "Wow, you're just the only one that's uniquely equipped to handle life," and I kind of was like, "I know, right?" He's like, "No, no, no, I'm being sarcastic. Like you're not the only one that can handle life. Like everybody struggles, everybody needs help. You're not perfect at it. And guess what? If they need help, so do you." And so
Yeah.
just remembering, I know for me, it's just admitting. And it's not even like a pride thing. It's almost like I don't want to be a burden. And so just
Mhm.
what Evelyn said, it's not a burden for other people who care about you to be able to help you. Well, I know we jammed through 30 minutes for well-being is nowhere near enough time, but we are hoping that you got some good nuggets out of it and some good reminders to take care of yourself. Coming up, you can use your phone if you want to scan and register right now. The next webinar that we're going to host is going to be Joe Jokowitz, Jerry Brem, and myself. We're going to talk about building your AI muscles and just kind of getting into the flow of how do you start to leverage, what are we seeing show up in workplaces. Some of you may be experts at this, some of you may be just figuring out how to dip your toe in the pool. We're going to talk about some best practices, but speaking of the topic of help, we're here to help. And so make sure you can reach out to us for a free consultation if you just want some thought partnership. There's some folks on the webinar today that I know have taken advantage of that. We do needs assessments, team planning. So sometimes like to bring in the topics that we do to do team sessions. We also help design and build strategies, as well as strategic thinking and executive coaching.
Feel free to contact us, as Heather said. If you want to reach out to us, I'd be happy to provide my personal email, Gonzalez at the Executive Advisory. Heather, I'm sure wouldn't mind you sending out an email if you have any questions about this webinar, any more questions about well-being. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you at a future webinar.
Yes, thank you, everybody. We'll be sending the recording, and you'll have both of our emails on that so you can stalk us.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Everybody, have a good day.